Try also to anticipate your career for 10 years to 20 years. Where do you want to perform research? So I studied biology, physiology at the University of Montpellier. Then I followed by a master in neuroscience, and it was linked to endocrinology. And then I moved on to the PhD. So I was strongly interested in neuroscience before starting. So I didn't find any funding because the funding was already given to the university in a person called Benjamin Grenier, and he already had the funding for both salary and experiments. So it was an open exam, and the best would go on and move to the PhD program. That's a good question. I didn't know him, but I did a PubMed result search, and then I seen that he published a lot, so I went on. But no, I didn't know him. For the subject, I chose the subject that was electrophysiology based, and the technique used were going to be interesting, and loads of results could be acquired. This is what you have to look for. A PhD where you can actually acquire data quite fast to be able to publish. So the funding you can look for, at least in neuroscience, you can look in all the web-based programs. For example, the Society for Neuroscience, it's the biggest, and usually they offer fundings or internships. You can, of course, start with an internship and move on to the PhD if the relationship with your supervisor goes well. The country is very important. Make sure you choose a country where funding is available and when you will be able to live quite decently. So, for example, try to avoid countries where no student unions exist or where you will have some kind of political tensions. I choose the UK because I thought research was very different than the French system that I already knew, and I thought the opportunities for career were better. So the PhD management is an interesting question because you have to be very organized. You have to take notes of all the experiments that you do, and you have to keep data very accurate. You also have to have a lot of anticipation before you actually start experimenting, otherwise you will be drowned into work, and in the end you will not be able to publish anything. So make sure you keep also communication open with your supervisor, so if anything goes wrong you can catch it soon. So anticipating is quite complicated. I recommend you read a lot of articles before you actually start. In that case, you can avoid mistakes by, for example, not taking weight of the animals or not scoring whatever behavior you're trying to measure. So make sure you actually read a lot of publication on the subject and make sure the measurements that you will perform will be in sufficient quantity and will cover a large panel of measurements. So I think, once again, you have to maintain communication open. This can save you to some tricky situation where actually you are going nowhere, or you're just sinking into a question that will never be answered because it's either too difficult or because the university hasn't got the technical tools to answer it. So yeah, keep the communication open, and I think that you can solve all the problems that may arise if you maintain a two-way communication with both your co-workers and your supervisors. So I think you have to organize your either daily or monthly or weekly routine in advance, and you can also get some tips from your supervisors, but yeah, try to anticipate as much as possible. This will save you time, either if you need to go back to some data or if you need to examine the data before. So what's very enjoyable is that in the beginning you are very new, so you need a lot of supervision, but as time flies, actually, you will gain more and more self-confidence and autonomy. So it's a normal transition. In the beginning you will be lost. It's even emphasized if your subject is new. So you can definitely use Microsoft Word to keep a kind of a lab book. But you of course need Excels and all the PowerPoints for it. Now remember that in order to publish some articles, with the figures, Illustrator is a good software to have and to handle. It will take some time because it's quite complicated, but you may save time afterwards when you will need to publish the articles. So that's a tricky question, because you can have a situation where you were very successful in publishing, but the techniques you use are routinely based, so you will not be very competitive in the work job afterwards. Now, I recommend choosing a technique that is kind of cutting edge, and that you look in advance for what position the university is looking for and what techniques will be good to master before applying. Yes, well, it's a balance that you have to get between publication and techniques. No publication, people will ask what happens. If you have a lot of publication, people will think you're an expert, but if it's just the same technique, it's not good for your CV either. So yeah, for the curriculum, I would recommend new techniques, cutting edge science, and a minimum of publications. How the reviewing process is made in the articles. So once again, it's linked to anticipation. So if I knew the process of publishing articles is so complicated and so long, I would have anticipated a lot more beforehand. So keep in mind that asking questions with your supervisor on how the publication process is made, read a lot of articles, think about all the data that you need to acquire, and then hopefully with this kind of anticipation, you will have enough to perform a successful PhD. So saving time with bachelor's or master's degree is not necessarily true, because you have to train them in the beginning, and then they will become more and more autonomous. However, I think it is capital, if you can and if funding is available, to get students on board, to get students involved, because I personally learned a lot by teaching to students. So it's a very good idea, but it will depend if you get funding and if the lab is attractive or not. Okay. Now, I will not recommend to have more than one at a time, because management is very time consuming. So try to keep just one student, maybe one master student, and maximum one master student and one undergrad student, but try to keep as minimum as possible, not to be overcrowded with work. Once again, maintain communication, a two-way process, and try to avoid being very directive. Just ask if they have any questions, make them feel comfortable, and treat them as scientists already, because this is the part of the formation and it's the initial step into research. We were all students before. I think you need, so first it takes time, like people will email you once you get recognized in the field and once you master the technique. So in the beginning, I think your supervisor can have some collaboration and then work will be transferred to you. However, on a long-term run, over the course of 5 to 10 years, people will start contacting you directly in order to either perform experiments or to write reviews with them. People are contacting us either for the technique or for previous articles that we've published, and they want to continue the research questions. But I'd say supervisors are the ones that are contacted mainly first, and then work will be transferred to you. So this topic is very widely discussed on the internet. I personally chose a supervisor that first spoke English, this is important to maintain communication, and that recently published. Now, it's not mandatory that a recent publication was published by your supervisor, but ask the right questions. Why is there no publication? Is it a lack of funding? Is it that he's got or she's got no time to invest in research? These are the sort of questions you need to ask. Finding the right supervisor is a hard topic. You can also contact previous students if you can, if the email's address are known, etc. But yeah, don't hesitate to ask around and to make some bibliography work. So, of course, you will be in a program. No PhD student is left alone. The faculty usually has some members, so you can contact any member of staff and they will try to help you. There is also all the student support groups, especially in England and in North America. You can contact other students. Sometimes it's an easy transition between one supervisor to the other, especially if you have two supervisors in the beginning. However, if you only have one supervisor in the beginning, people usually are transferred into another team to continue the PhD along. Never during the PhD program. However, once you start the postdoc position, pressure is starting to build because you are actually building your curriculum and your career and you want to really enter research actively. But I'd say in the beginning of the PhD program, don't get too much stress and don't get over-pressurized. This will have counter effects, side effects. The fun situation was trying to collaborate with some musicians, and we started this neuronal approach where music could influence the way neurons fired. This was known for a long time. I started a collaboration that didn't end well because actually the project was not focused enough and we were going nowhere. This was kind of fun also to see the differences between social sciences and more science-based laboratory work. The most weird part was sometimes not knowing what I was going to perform the next month and also to fill in all the paperwork. So finding ideas usually you find in previous publications, either from the lab, from your team, or from different institutions or universities. This is usually very representative of current research, especially if you read high impact factor articles. However, bear in mind that you can choose some topics that are not at all explored by others, but you may end up going in the wall with probably nothing in the end to publish. So, yes. So first, the topic in a review, you find yourself, you need to find it interesting in order to write it, otherwise it will just be a list of unrelated articles. Make sure you are passionate about the review you are writing and make sure you read the current bibliography, not stuff that was dated from ages ago. You can choose also a topic that's far away from your expertise. This personally helped me to increase my knowledge in either nutrition or metabolic pathways. So trying to find something that's exciting for you and that may be exciting for others because this is the publication criteria. I'd say start with the abstract, go through the abstract quite quickly, then if it is relevant, go into details, and then make sure you explore the technique throughout. This will save you time later on if you find the same techniques again. Yes, I never took any notes. You can have a little summary in the beginning, in one corner of your head to remember, but some find taking notes very useful. I didn't. And once you read over and over, you will memorize. And actually, memory is so fascinating that it can help you ages afterwards, even years. So read the abstract, go in details for the abstract, then read the methods thoroughly, and then move on to the results and the conclusions. This is very important, and the more you read, the more familiar you will get with it, and then it becomes almost a reflex, especially if you always read about the same technique. So writing an article, usually when you start, you have a draft that's already made by your supervisor. However, if you start from scratch, write the results first. So you write the results, you put up the figures, and then you will move on to both the introduction and the discussion. But make sure you organize the results for a clear, logical order, and the figure will subsequently flow themselves. So everybody has encountered negative results. I think it's most of our jobs. The trend nowadays is to have enough negative results but interesting results in the same in the same data set that you can either publish in great journals, or some journals are specialized in publishing negative results. However, the research question needs to be very, very focused. Don't get discouraged with negative results. This is part of the job. We have it on a daily basis. In the end, you will find something. I am sure of it. This is why also the PhD program is so long, 3 years in Europe, sometimes more in Northern America. You need time to accumulate enough data and to alter the project as you collect negative results. So rejection is always a little bit frustrating. However, keep in mind that you also have the comments of the reviewers, and then you will be able to modify the article and to improve its quality in the end. Sometimes it can take 2 to 3 years to publish a paper. Don't get discouraged, and it will finally be published either in its original form or after a few alterations. So have a clear poster. Don't overcrowd it with too much sentences. Prefer some visual diagrams, figures, and tables. Try to avoid as much text as possible. So it's a bit similar for the presentation. You try to avoid too much text, and also think that you have to drive the audience, especially through the PowerPoint. Sometimes it can be quite linear. Try to modify your voice tone, try to pitch it, and if you can include humor, it's even better. So this is an interesting question. Don't ask a question because you want to ask a question. Think about it before asking, and I think, Cyprien, you did a great job with a picture that represented the steps through the talk and when and how to ask a question. So you will find all the answers on the internet. Don't rush into answering a question. Think about it before you actually start building your response. It's always difficult because you're going to be a little stressed, and you're going to be under pressure, either peer pressure or family pressure if it's an open PhD program. Think about it before you actually reply, and remember that if you don't know, you just say it. Don't try to make up an answer. It's going to look terrible. Be honest and focus on what you can bring to the lab or to the research questions that they are asking. Be as honest as possible, but don't shoot yourself in the foot either. You have to balance both technical work with previous works and laboratory-based experiments, especially in science. How to make a good resume? I think you have to have it in a chronological order and try to emphasize a linear story where you actually build up your curriculum over the years in order to master this or that technique. Also, emphasize publications. Try to start to be included in the project and in a research paper as soon as possible. This is going to be capital. So having free time and hobbies is absolutely vital, I think, because work is going to be so important in your life. You need to maintain a balance outside of work. Try to meet with people, try to go out, try to make some exercise, physical exercise, of course, and try to maintain a balance between work and hobbies. This is absolutely vital, especially in a stressful environment. Depression can occur, especially with lots of negative results or unpublishable results. However, you will move on as the data is accumulating. However, if you have clinical depression, you can talk to your supervisor. He will have some good answers for you. So try to register to the Student Union Board if it is available in your university. In England and North America, it's quite common. Try also to go to all the research seminars. You can make friends either in your faculty or in the others. Try to maintain a social life, diversify your activities, your hobby activities, and then you will have a lot of social life. Try to avoid isolating and isolation. I'm not sure. I think it depends on the subject, it depends on the country you live in. I was very, very happy in England because social life was great, research was great, funding was there, data was acquired quite fast, and publication got along. So I think it's a combination, and it's a very personal question. Everybody's going to be different. Try to go outside of the lab, try to meet new people, and as life goes on, you will be happy, I am sure. 3, 2 as the first author, 1 in collaboration, 1 review, and many to come, because even when you have left the lab, data will still continue to be published. So yeah, don't panic if you don't have too much data in the beginning, or a few papers published. It will be published in the end, either once while you're here or afterwards. The salary was very decent in England, especially it was tax-free because it was in the form of a stipend. In Europe, I think you won't have any problem. In Northern America either, but sometimes keep in mind that part-time PhD programs will need you to get some extra work outside of the lab or in the lab if you can. So once again, anticipation of the data that I acquired. Sometimes I am missing parameters, so make sure you record every little detail of all the experiments. Otherwise, it can become tricky years afterwards when you start publication. Same university, same supervisor, same subject, without a doubt. Probably leave the UK. I should have remained probably in the UK. However, here it's also good. So yeah, you have to balance the university that you know and your future experiences. I think the opportunities, especially to build up a career in England, in North America, is slightly more linear than in other European countries. So try also to anticipate your career for 10 years to 20 years. Where do you want to perform research? Funding, is it available in your country? Is it available internationally? Can you move once you're in the job? These are the questions you have to ask yourself, either in the start of your PhD or afterwards. Passion and perseverance, definitely. And also you have to maintain communication all the time. So speak, think, and try to anticipate. Self-control, I think. You really have to be in control of your emotions, and large-scale collaboration. Choose wisely, and sometimes moving and going abroad is probably the best solution, especially if a new environment is going to be very exciting for you. Yes, maintain communication. I think this is capital, especially in a lab-based environment where you will need to talk to people if you encounter any on a daily basis. Experience, I think, both in the techniques and personal experience, but also you will mature into the science field. Don't rush into a program where you don't feel comfortable with the subject. I think being passionate about the subject beforehand, before even starting, is paramount, especially if it's a bit tricky.
Okay. Would you do it again?
In a heartbeat.